Senator, thank you for joining me again today. You have an upcoming Senate committee meeting, hearing actually with Dr. Fauci, and I'm sure he's really looking forward to seeing you this time. So I'm curious what you hope to glean this time around.
You know, I think most important is what we do moving forward. We're in the middle of a pandemic where about 1% of the people died. 5 million people died worldwide, but it has about a 1% mortality, and yet it upturned the economy. Economies were locked down, trillions of dollars were lost. What happens if it's worse the next time? What if a virus leaks from a lab that has 15% mortality or 50% mortality? All of the evidence now is pointing towards this coming from a lab. If it came from a lab, it could happen again. So really what we need to do is be discussing, should we be doing gain of function research? Should the taxpayer be funding it? Do we trust the Chinese to be doing this in a fashion that it wouldn't leak from a lab, or they might not try to militarize it? These are all important questions, and nobody's asking them. We've had no committee hearings on this. The U.S. government should be approaching this in a thoughtful way to try to decide, could this happen again? How did this happen? And nobody's doing it. So I'm going to ask him and give him a chance once again to try to make a statement on gain of function research, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, speaking of that, you and Representative Comer sent a letter to the NIH asking why changes were recently made to their website, including the removal of the gain of function subject heading. Is this their subtle way of being caught red-handed and covering up?
Yeah, and maybe not so subtle way. I mean, removing the definition or changing the definition. All along, Dr. Fauci has been hiding behind semantics or words. So we will tell him, yes, they created a virus that gained in dangerousness or gained in lethality. And he's like, oh, yeah, but it's not gain of function research. Well, if it isn't, then what is gain of function? And so I think what he's doing is hiding behind semantics. But now they've explicitly removed the definition of gain of function from the website. So they really are trying to hide the responsibility of the NIH, the responsibility of Dr. Fauci towards the funding of Wuhan and the possibility that this came from the Wuhan lab. They're covering their you-know-what. Here's what they're doing.
Well, you and your Senate colleagues also have sent a letter to Fauci about the cruel treatment of beagles as lab experiments. Do you think that the FDA mandated Fauci to do this, or do you suspect it was elective? And why would the NIAID do this?
I think that many scientists are blasé, and they just sort of like cursorily looked at this and said, oh, well, whatever, if it's, to research for disease. And I think it needs to be much more specific and much more scrutinized to say, is this a life-saving research that needs to be done, or is this superfluous and something that really could be done in either a lower animal species like a rat or a hamster, or is this something that could be studied in the laboratory? So we've introduced legislation to make it an option. Right now, if you have a drug approved, it has to be done and tested on animals. We're making that optional through legislation if we can get ours passed. Did Dr. Fauci actually see this study? He oversees thousands of studies, but he's ultimately responsible. He might not have seen this individual one, but if the NIH funded it, and if it appears to be torture, and most of us think that some of these experiments do, then it should be stopped. And he should be held responsible as being the titular head of this funding source. So yeah, he should be made to answer questions about it.
Well, I know that Peter Navarro is going to be releasing a book soon in which he reveals some bombshells about Fauci during his time in the Trump administration, such as Fauci stubbornly insisting, in my experience, travel restrictions do not work. May I ask you, how can the nation's top medical advisor be wrong so often and still be employed?
Well, that's the real danger. He shouldn't be employed, but the fact that he still is, and he still is this leading voice, and that he's dictating basically health policy for the whole country on COVID is very dangerous to our health. I'll give you an example. One of the key treatments if you get COVID that you need to get early on if you're getting sick or if you're at high risk is monoclonal antibodies. He has dictated from the top down that if you become an inpatient, if you're in the hospital, you cannot get the monoclonal antibodies. He's also said if your symptoms have been out there more than 10 days, you can't get it. So this is cookbook medicine from a central authority from Fauci working its way down. He's also told people that cloth masks work when they don't. And so if you're 80 years old and your spouse has COVID and you say, well, I'm going to take care of my spouse and I'll just wear a cloth mask like Dr. Fauci does, you're putting yourself at risk because they don't work. They really, frankly, do not work. And there are masks that might be more beneficial, like an N95 mask. But Fauci's actually spreading disinformation that could cost people lives. And then he's spreading edicts that prevent people from getting treatment that could actually save lives. So all of this put together, without question, he ought to be fired soon as possible.
I hate to ask you to speculate, Senator, but why do you think President Trump didn't fire him?
I think initially there were many Republicans, and some of them in the Senate, who loved Dr. Fauci. They loved his stabilizing voice. They thought he was a good contrast to, President Trump, who sometimes would shoot from the hip. And so they liked his voice until he discovered that he was a celebrity and that he could say anything, anywhere, whether it was about dating on Tinder, whether we should play baseball or hockey. He's got an opinion about everything, and he's got an idea that we should mandate about 1 million different behaviors. So I think he was someone who as he became more known and in the public eye, he became more dangerous, but people became more aware. I didn't know who he was the first time I saw him, but now we do. So all America knows him, but all America knows him to be somebody who disdains individual liberty and believes in government edicts for all of our behavior, regardless of the science, and sometimes in contradiction to the science.
Medical freedom is obviously a major issue right now, and we're seeing a lot of New York firefighters and policemen call in sick due to the vaccine mandates. What recourse should these critical servants have?
I think we have to end with this question, but I would say that it's a great disservice to fire people, nurses, doctors, firemen, policemen, who put their life at risk when there was no vaccine at all. They put their life at risk. And now for the government to say, you're just yesterday's trash and we're going to remove you, particularly since many of them got COVID while taking care of people. The doctors and nurses caught COVID from their patients. Most of them survived, fortunately. They now have immunity. And all the science, 102 studies, show that you have immunity if you've had the disease naturally. Nothing's perfect, but your immunity is as good as the vaccine, and there's no reason for the government to be mandating a vaccine, particularly on people who've already had the disease.
Well, we'll end on that note. Senator Paul, thank you so much for your time, and good luck in the hearing tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.